stars be with you.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Energetic Principles podcast. My name is Melissa LaFara. I am your host today, and I've got a new guest on the program, Nyssa Grazda, with me here today. Thanks for joining me, Nyssa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I pulled Nyssa and I both write for Sanctuary, actually. If you check out Sanctuary app, or we write the daily horoscopes for the app, which I don't ever really tell anybody about. It's kind of like that behind the scenes work that astrologers do that, nobody really they consume, but nobody really knows about it. But that's how I met Nyssa here. And I drew her out of her personal writing hole to come do this podcast with me and put her face on the screen. And so let's give a round of applause for Nyssa for coming and showing face today. Yes.
You know, me loves the applause. The 12th houser in me is like, no, please don't perceive me.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you for getting me out of my hole.
Yes. So we have a fabulous conversation today. I love this topic that Nyssa brought up about, what is the future of objective reality when we're going into this AI landscape, and truth is becoming so much harder to discern, who's telling it, who do we listen to? Do we have to do our due diligence ourselves? What does this look like? And especially in the landscape of this upcoming Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries, 0 degrees Aries, where it's a whole new landscape. Not to mention sextiling Pluto over there in Aquarius. So this is coming down the pipeline, and we're going to talk about it here today. But before we do that, Nyssa, share a little bit about yourself with the listeners. Tell them who you are.
So my name is Nyssa Grazda. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, and writer. My studies began in 2006, and I attended my first workshop with my teacher, Stephen Forrest, in 2008. So I've been going at this a while, but I've been full-time in the biz since about 2021. And my practice just really involves using the lunar nodes to help my clients cultivate more agency in their life, to become more empowered and more happy, really, at the end of the day. And also to just develop a more enchanted relationship with existence. So that's my major goal in my practice. Like Mel said, I also write horoscopes for the Sanctuary app. I write transit analyses for the Australia-based astrological planner company, Magic of I. And I also co-organized the first annual LA Astrofest, which took place in Los Angeles Highland Park neighborhood this past April. So that's a little bit about me.
Ooh, I didn't even know that was going down. Well, how do
You
you
gotta get up
find such
from
things?
San Diego for the word.
I know, it's so funny. I'm like 2 hours away, but like that 2 hours feels like an eternity. Well, it can if there's traffic. 2 hours could turn into 5 hours easily,
10
depending on
hours
when
of
you
fun.
go. Yeah. So, but there's always things, going on in LA. Like I wanted to go see Ali Alomi, did a talk, that, oh my gosh, why is her name escaping me? It's
Was it
coming, it's
Vivi?
going. Vivi, thank you, Vivi.
Yeah, she was the other co-organizer for LA Astrofest. So Vivi
Yeah.
Henriette also puts on a lot of programming through the Philosophical Research Society. She hosts a salon there. I think it's the last Tuesday of every month. So that's a plug there for her to check out that content.
Yeah, it's funny. Vivi was on the program many moons ago. It seems, time just flies, but it was right about the time that she was actually moving to LA. So it's so cool to see, her flourishing and really supporting the astrological community because, as as the former president of the San Diego Astrological Society, I know what it's like to like get your community of astrologers together because it's really nice to be in a physical room or outdoors, wherever you are with other people that practice astrology. And so hats off to all us organizers out there. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. So
I do think that this is going to become a theme in the coming years as well, like with just the internet and social media becoming more of a murky situation, like that in-person community gathering is going to become increasingly important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully you're going to be doing it next year. Is there any like word on the street? Is there any little formulation of?
I am going to hopefully be involved in some capacity, but the organizing is with Vivi now in a full way. So,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I still want to be involved. I'm excited to see who she gets on the docket for this year.
Oh, cool. Well, I will keep a lookout now that I know. Yeah. So, I mean, the algorithm tells me nothing, and I have a on Instagram. I have a 3 post swipe limit. So if I'm on, if I get on, so whatever gives me first, I will definitely look at, and then I have maybe 1 to 2 to 3 after that, and then that's it. I won't.
Actually,
I'm not a doom scroller. I'm like, just give me what. And luckily, it tends to give me things that are interesting or funny or, yeah, because it's just too much. So let's get into our talk here today about objective reality. It's so funny when you think about objective reality because it's like how, despite AI or despite our landscapes, like how many of us actually live in objective reality to begin with, like.
yeah, I
But
think like that, just that idea of like objective reality, yeah, is probably an impossibility, but consensus reality, certainly becoming more increasingly polarized and increasingly stratified. Um, so yeah, like maybe consensus, more of the term.
yeah. No, I love that. That because that makes sense because, you think about, back in the days of like, earlier TV time or like maybe the 60s or whatever, you'd get on, there'd be like the world news. There's just like one channel telling you things, Walter Cronkite's on there and he's like, this is what is going on today. And with, like, and that I mean, it's an interesting dichotomy because it's like, in one respect, like consensus reality was so, filtered and streamlined, in the past because there's only like 1 or 2 news channels that are telling you something, which could be good if they're on, an unbiased page, but also, like if it's only filtering down one hole, like it can be cherry picked as to what's shared. And then now we just have so many sources of information coming at us everywhere. So how do we know what's real and what to believe? And I love that you brought up, because if you think about Saturn and Neptune together, like Saturn has that concretization effect of like, what the system is, what's actually, what's the reality of it. And Neptune's like, well, let's just let's blur the edges of what reality actually looks like. And you had brought up that, that it's essentially like a trickster quality, right? Yeah.
I've very much been like playing with that idea of it. So there was a term popularized by this anthropologist called Victor Turner, which is called anti-structure. And just thinking about um, the anti-structure is essentially, it's referring to like a temporary breakdown in class structure or status that disrupts social order, and invites in personal or societal transitions. And that's often facilitated through a rite of passage. So it's like in between the structure of the past, the Saturnian structure of the past, and whatever structure is to come, there's this liminal period where boundaries are crossed, or taboos are explored, or roles are reversed, or like hierarchies are subverted. So it's this place of like ambiguity and instability, which I think we can kind of all agree is where we've been for the better part of a while. But this liminal space is kind of that space where like the shaman, or the trickster can occupy, um, which kind of dovetails with another part of this conversation I know we're going to get into about like paranormal phenomena or like altered states of consciousness. So like the trickster figure appears to guide us through initiatory experiences, which is something that I don't think I've heard a lot of astrologers talk about in reference to Saturn Neptune. But that's when I was looking at this, especially as the conjunction is happening in Aries, and especially as it's happening like on the 0 degree, on this critical degree, it very much feels to me like an initiatory experience. Um, and we who are in the West, who lack these kinds of rites of passage, um, probably like interpret this period that we're in right now as being like very chaotic, or like there's like a borderline psychosis kind of quality with the Saturn and the Neptune working together. Um, when really what we're going through is this necessary breakdown of structure, because no further growth can like occur in that old reality. Um, so that's kind of what I was looking at with like Saturn and Neptune. And I think it's interesting too that, like, yeah, we think of Saturn in this concretizing fashion, and we think of Neptune as like the breakdown of borders, but also Saturn does exist like at the very edge of like the observable reality for us, like planetary wise. Um, so it is kind of also a liminal character. Like, even though we think about it in terms of like the modern day kind of like practical reality, both of these figures are kind of talking to each other and ushering us into this new form of experience that feels very destabilizing. Um, but it's like we're in that like hangman. We're in the in between right now, and I think that their conjunction next year gives us the opportunity to concretize in a new way. Um, that was where I was going with this kind of like
Yeah.
trickster element.
No, I love that. I love that. I love okay, a couple things. One, thinking about Saturn as, because Saturn, with our naked eye, Saturn is about as far as we can see. And I think there was a term, oh God, I'm forgetting it right now. It's like something I read so many years ago, but they reference Saturn as something green. It's like a green ring or a green, like, because it is the boundary of known reality, basically. And it was, oh man, it would have been good if I knew it, but green emerald, green something, something green. I'll come back with that. But I love this idea of thinking about, Saturn meeting if Saturn is the outer edge of our reality, and it is potentially that liminal space, like it's like a crust. It's like a crust that we hold and contain everything that we know about our reality in. But have you ever had a soggy crust before? Like if like water gets in, or, like, and it starts to fall apart, and it's like this idea of like our crust of reality is now meeting this this penetrable force that erodes it. And what it does, and I love the initiation aspect of it, because if that reality and that crust is eroded, and then we are initiated into something that is beyond, that is potentially supernatural, that is beyond our imagination, because it's Saturn has cut off what we can imagine to be. And then Neptune comes in, it's like, hold on. Or the trickster kind of mercurial energy, which we think trickster usually as Mercury, but trickster can just be about anything that sort of dupes you into a divine detour, essentially. And we need that. Yeah, we need that. And I think about like the last program, if you've been listening in succession, Spencer Michaud talked about his partner uh, getting fired from her job, and she's the breadwinner of the house. And they're like, what are we going to do about this? But that's the thing, is like, that's the trickster energy at play. Like, we don't initiate ourselves half the time unless the trickster comes around and pulls out the rug to push us into the liminal space.
Exactly. And I think like it's an interesting thing I've been thinking about, especially with the Aries of it all, is especially as we get closer to February of next year, I think it is going to be really important for all of us individually to like have a vision. Um, and I think some of us, like yours truly included, it's it's hard for us to do that sometimes, because we live in a culture where we've been indoctrinated essentially to either like meet kind of like predetermined milestones, and that like determines our success, or we just find it really easy to work for other people, to like labor for another person's vision. And like there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with working for another person, or for like supporting the visions of your friends or your family. um, but it's like we can't disappear into another person's vision right now. We have to figure out who we are, like as individuals aspiring to be on the other side of this initiation. um, because the alternative is like getting stuck in the liminal. And in terms of this conversation of like objective reality and technocracy and like the who's in charge of that like technocratic oligarch pyramid, it's like we risk getting really overwhelmed by like the technological or commercial or financial interests or priorities of those who have a vision of a future that serves their own best interests, and not our own best interests. So it's like we have to be self-interested now because those at the top of that oligarch pyramid have enough self-interest to go around. Like they have a vision of the future. They know what they want to get for themselves and what they want to get out of us. And so if you don't know how to train your attention, other people will exploit your attention, the attention you're giving to them for free, to build the world that they want to live in and not the world that like you want to live in. Even just in terms of like that scroll idea of just like only allowed a couple of scrolls. How we train our attention at this moment in time matters, and I think is going to become more and more significant the closer we get to that Saturn Neptune.
No, I love that point. I love that point. Yeah, at the we give so much of our time and our attention away to these it's like the vision of the oligarchs and the tech barons, and it's not like their vision is new. Like they've been invested in this vision for a very long time, and now it's coming to the point where if we're going to erode some sort of boundary, I love thinking about that. Like, what is my self-interest here? Because self-interest is not necessarily a selfish thing, because I mean, too much of it maybe so, but we have to have some sort of self-interest so that we can, fulfill what our missions are in this world that will impact other people too, because it's like when we step into our own vision and what we have to give, like hopefully that, benefits the collective in some way. But to having gone through Pluto is in the midst of the collective planets for, a good, how many, probably 60 plus years, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Saturn just got out of that business. Neptune's been in there a long time. And there has been, these big forces that are focused more on this like global reality. And then there's always people that rise to the top there's always going to be someone in control. Like that's the end of the game. But I think that what you're bringing up about Aries and that poignant 0-degree point is like, hold on. I've been molded by the machine. I've been molded by, like the puppets, pulling the marionette pulling the strings essentially of humanity. And so how do I wake up from that? Could be part of that. If we're coming back to objective reality, because maybe objective reality is not just the truth of what we see on the news, but like being like, hold on, like, let me see what's really actually going on here. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think also too just like that idea of, and we've been kind of having a time for the like
That's
since like
true.
Saturn Pluto, like we've been dealing the unprecedented times continue to get more unprecedented, and it's it's okay to feel anxious about that. But what I see a lot of people doing is like pining for the simpler times. Like if we're in this like anti-structural period and there's the time before and there's the time to come, like so many people are focused on like, I just want things to get like back to normal. I just want things to like return to the place that they were. And I was having this discussion with kind of a magical friend the other day about the idea of how people who are kind of like at the top of that like tech pyramid right now, like they're thinking about the future. They're not thinking about how to get back to where we were, but a large part of the population is just like, no, I just want to like my simpler times and like my affordable goods. And it's not wrong to want those things. Like I want those things too. But if the people who are in control are thinking about the future and you're not putting yourself in that same future, if you're not thinking to yourself like, no, like I'm going to get past the soggy crust of this like Saturn Neptune and I'm going to like make my own thing happen, then like, yeah, like the attention economy is going to continue to exploit you and your interests in that way. And like, it's bad magic. It's like
Mm.
the bad magicians are just like continuing to like be bad magicians instead of us being like, wait a minute, I can do magic too. Like
Yeah. I love
I can
that.
turn this around for myself. I
That's
can have a
right.
vision.
That's right. Yes. I mean, I think I don't even know if take for granted is the right word, maybe even forget how magical we all are, like no one is, I mean, some would maybe argue, based on charts and planetary placements and, how we're brought up. And, I guess obviously there are different elements that rise people up and give people advantages. That is true.
Mhm.
But you also see people that may have amazing stories that come from nothing and like so much disadvantage, but they have focus, they have intention, they have willpower, and maybe the universe coincides a little bit. But I
Yeah.
mean, and I think that it has to do a lot with the actual focus of the intention and the will. Because this is also something I was talking about with Spencer is like I've been thinking a lot about fear-based mentality and like what that does to our magical abilities because if it's like the magical thinking of if your mind is always essentially if we think about I always like to think about reality as like a role-playing game and the world is being created and generated as you play the game and that to me that's the mental function and so where your mind's at is going to generate that next scene essentially maybe not always in a total collective world vibe, but at least in your own reality. And so, how do we mitigate that to be our version of success stories by like curbing, because Saturn can have a lot to do with fear or being overly, mired by obstacles or limitations or, the boundaries of life or like, survival issues, poverty issues. Like these are all real issues, but yeah, it's just I love that. How do we not focus on like nothing is ever going back to the way it has been. Not even prices. Like that's just the reality. Like they keep pushing it and because they push it, it sets a new normal. We're at a new normal. But rather than getting so stuck in like trying to get back or being fearful of what will be, like we have to like own the power of the present, right? That's very fire. Fire is very now, present, do in the moment.
I
Yeah.
think the concern that I've seen people talk about with the Aries of it all is like that people are going to just become like there's like a hyper individualization or
Yeah.
like the ego will completely take over and like people will like everyone's just so self-interested that they can't look past their own faces but like we do have like Pluto hanging out as part of this equation like and we do have like Uranus there and like stirring stuff up too so I have I have hope that things aren't going to go in that direction and I think that what people have considered to be like self-interest for such a long time actually just has been like for the sake of propping up the powers that be because
Yeah.
again like you don't want to lose your security you don't want to lose like the things that have kept you in a safe space so there's that misinterpretation there of being like oh if I like am self-protective in this way that's like a selfish egotistical thing when really it's like no you were always just doing this for the sake of like commodities like
Yeah.
now we actually do get to like play with the parameters of this more like we kind of get to it's like you said we kind of just get to game things more like we get to experiment for ourselves more because if the structures that have kept us insulated for so long are crumbling and we can't put our faith in those anymore we have to put faith in ourselves
Absolutely. Yeah. Hmm. So, okay. A couple things come to mind. Uh, well, one of the things is yes, that was that's what happens when you have Mars and Gemini. They just all come, they all rush at you, and you're like, which do I talk about? Uh, I am thinking about some mitigation, especially since you're someone who works with the nodes, about thinking that we do have like a decent amount of passage time through this transition that has the North Node in these more collective and, other people spaces, right? We got it Pisces is going to keep Aquarius, Capricorn, Sagittarius, Scorpio, Libra. Like we're, in the next decade, we basically go through at least some sort of like pointing to something that is particularly self-oriented. So I don't know, that could be a mitigating factor perhaps of eclipses in those areas.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm looking at my chart right now
Yeah.
too, and just like seeing where we're at with that.
Yeah, I'm like, it goes so fast. I always forget. I'm like, what are we in now? Yeah, we're still in the Pisces zone. Actually, that's the interesting thing too, is that when we have the Saturn Neptune conjunction, February 20th, I believe, it's basically like bookended by eclipses, and one is like the North Node eclipse, in the first one in Aquarius. So there is absolutely a balancing out. It's almost like, how do we become our own vision and have our self-interest in a positive, motivating way that then offsets and contributes to the changing collective. So, one of the things that you had brought to my attention, because you had kind of gone down a wormhole with looking at Saturn Neptune conjunctions and like the strength of Saturn. And we've had, the last two Saturn Neptune conjunctions, one was in Capricorn, which is Saturn's domicile. The previous one was in Libra, which is Saturn's exaltation. But now we're coming up to a weak Saturn in a fallen Aries. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on like breaking the how that adds to the crust. Is that what makes the crust soggy with Neptune?
Well, it is. I mean, when it's interacting when it makes that conjunction with Neptune next year, it is going to get a little bit of an assist from Mars, because Mars is going to be in Aquarius. So like there is something that like I still do like Saturn is like debilitated, but there are still like things in this chart that to me are like, it's like, don't like count me out, like don't discount me, like I still have a voice in this conversation. And actually, this is something that I wrote about for Magic of Eye a couple of days ago, which I found interesting. So tomorrow is November 7th. Yeah, tomorrow Venus exits Libra to enter Scorpio. When it does that, when it shifts out of its domicile, all of the planets by dispositor chain are going to be answering to Jupiter. And Jupiter is in Cancer, so all of the planets are technically answering to the moon by dispositor chain. This is something that it's like, this isn't rare, this happens from time to time, but this is actually now going to last for us until Saturn enters Aries on February 13th. So for the next, like from tomorrow until February 13th, we're in this like weird, like lunar chaotic, like the inconstant moon is really kind of like everything is answering back to that moon. So February 13th of next year, suddenly it shifts, like Saturn shifts into Aries. So all of that dispositor chain like gets like disrupted by what Saturn's doing. And then on the 20th, Saturn and Neptune meet up. So there is still something like next year that's like, yeah, it's in fall, but like Saturn still really wants to be a part of this conversation in a big way. I don't think it's going to fully like everything is going to crumble, everything is going to become like dissolved or Neptunian. I just see it as like a segue almost. Like I see it as being like the transition of Saturn, of the conversation into something that's more, I don't just want to like use fiery, because fiery is just like, yeah, it's a fire sign, Nyssa. Like, we know that that's where it's going. But like, there's something here that's more, yeah, it's more focused and energized, even though it still is in fall, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, because think about cardinal energy and like cardinal being pivoting, being action oriented, like the I've likened it before to like the strike of a match, and the flame is lit and it's like everything's kicked up, which can have a lot of focus, a lot of quick focus. Elongated focus could be an issue, but But I mean, you think of focus also, focus is not just, let me sit down and research and get all this. Like focus is also vision, it's enthusiasm, it's it has a pointedness to it. It has an excitability to it. And so I do like that. I mean, I feel like I kind of like the idea of Saturn fallen because we obviously things are not going to be the same that they are, and we have to like fallen Saturn's not going to help with that. Like, you think Saturn, who's the planet of preservation, that's fallen in a sign of new beginnings, is going to help us get to the past? No. But it can also like break down walls and structures, maybe systems. Maybe they're just the walls that we have within ourselves that we have to like, break down and get to so that we can get to the vision and the enthusiasm and okay, it is a new day. We got to go with it. Like it's just is what it is. So I like to look at like debilitated planets as having like some sort of superpower because they are inconsistent and they don't uphold the standard. They don't uphold the norm, nor can they. And that can actually be a good thing because if you want to innovate in life and you want different results in life, then it's almost like you got to have inconsistency and, and innovation. So hopefully that'll.
There's like a ton of planets like in domicile and exaltation in my natal chart, and like people are always just like, it's like it's so easy. Like with them, just like sometimes ease is like not a good thing. Like sometimes like not thinking about a problem like that's not the flex we think it is. Like I'm always a fan of like hard aspects or like like anything that like causes you to think more critically about the state that you're in. And that might be part of this conversation of like Saturn and Aries is just like what are the barriers to our own creativity that we've been like too afraid to explore. Like how can we kind of like break those down? How can we feel a little bit less self-conscious and like dive more into the like how that dovetails with like the Neptune of it all, like how we can dive into that
I love that.
in a more interesting way. And also just the rarity of this for the data nerds out there, compared to like the Saturn Neptune conjunctions in Capricorn or in Libra. I'm pretty sure it's like for the past 2,000 years, we've had like 9 or 10 of those each. We've only had 5 Saturn Neptune conjunctions in Aries in the past 2,000 years. So like the newness is newing.
The newness is newing. So yeah, it's out there. All right. Well, let's start to talk about AI a bit. And you had brought to my attention Chat GPT hallucinations, because Chat GPT is all the rage out there right now, and I use it from time to time. I'm not like on it like crazy, but occasionally I'll pull it up and be like, help me organize this thought, kind of thing. But a lot of people are turning to it for getting information, for fact checking, for research. Obviously, you think it's like, oh, you're the sum of all the internet. Like, why wouldn't I research from you? It's like straight to the horse's mouth of like the information that I can get. Also, when we think about a lot of people are turning to it for like personal issues where, Chat GPT therapist or like the friend, we're isolated and a lot of people feel alone. And it's like you can just turn to a bot and you'll have someone who can talk to you. It's not even just type. It's like on my phone, like Chat GPT gives me this smooth talking man named Spruce. And I can't sometimes I want to have a conversation with Spruce. And I'm like, no, this is not a person. Just because his voice is so soothing. I'm like, Jesus. I'm like, anyways. But within that, you had brought up that Chat GPT, it's not infallible. And there's a lot of like hallucinations and it's spitting out misinformation. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I should preface this with like I'm not an expert on ChatGPT or on AI technology. It's just something that I've been increasingly interested in, especially since like the release of Sora 2 that happened a few weeks back as well. And just the automatic inclination of people to like jump on these bandwagons, like psychologically, that's been very interesting to me. But yeah, looking at this phenomenon of like ChatGPT and AI hallucinations, it's like essentially like large language models are they're they're basically like, their intention is like predictive text. Like they want to be able to speak to you in a way that like is natural and sounds informed. And so large language models um, tend to hallucinate because like it's almost like they tend to get closer to the optics of credibility if they make stuff up, if they sound more correct, or if they seem more trustworthy, rather than if they're actually giving you like good, like sourced, trusted information. And this has been a problem with like the latest models of ChatGPT that have been released, because they're starting to speak to people in this very like sycophantic way, which is like essentially just reinforcing what you're saying or reinforcing what you want to believe. Um, so that's dangerous, especially if you're, if you're a person who's dealing with like a mental health crises. And the large language model just wants to continue to like reinforce a belief or reinforce potentially like your own paranoia. Um, so yeah, that's definitely been something that's been on my mind lately.
Yeah. It makes me think of, I don't know, the term "the customer is always right" came to my head for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, AI isn't designed to uh, necessarily challenge us in any way. And I read an article the other day about some parents that were suing, I believe ChatGPT, for the suicide of their son who was like looking for help, and in at one point he had asked the bot, that he had a long going conversation with, if he should tell his mother, and it said, to keep it, it's okay, you can keep it under wraps, or like it said it in a way that if it would have been the perfect time to be like, yes, tell someone about this, but I forget
Here's
exactly
the
how
number
it.
of a crisis center.
Yes, exactly. That's that, but somehow it was like, I mean, it might have even said of like, you got this, or "N- don't worry someone else about it." I don't know what it was, but, and it is probably something that it was already echoed from, the boys' concerns that had already been talked about. And so it was just like reinforced there. So that's like one, aspect of it. Like not everybody's going through that, but that's the issue, and if you think about people that have like really extremist views that aren't checked, with objective reality, right? We're going down this subjective wormhole, that can be dangerous and can be violent. Um, and then it's just reinforced by this, this energy that's not going to fight back. And then, but then at the same time, it's like, how can it, unless you ask it to, because I know that like with certain, AI, you can kind of program it to be like, I want to be challenged, or I want to be like, but its default mechanism is not that, nor is it one to, because it's trying to like Libra out and always be like as balanced as it possibly can. Like it's not going to, like AI is not going to play devil's advocate to something, because it's not like necessarily designed to do that, because it doesn't have an opinion, right? Or like like
Doesn't have
so,
any lived experiences, so it can't really
absolutely.
give you like cogent advice on that. And also, like one of the interesting things in the training of LLMs is that like, so it's essentially like data mining to get all of its data that it's then like repurposing and regurgitating out for you. But so many times, if you're an astrologer and you've written a lot of documentation on astrology, probably like within the documentation on astrology, you as an author, as a human being, you aren't writing in there like, oh, and I don't know about this. Like, I don't know about this one thing. So if you think about like a model that's taking in all of this information, and in no part of that information is it able to understand that there's like gaps in information, or that like something might not be known, or that something could be wrong conceivably, then like that's another thing too. Like it's a part of LLMs, like they aren't admitting fallibility or like telling you to go elsewhere for information, because they're not being trained on humans
Yeah.
who are admitting that like we don't know something. If you have a human talk with someone, they might say like, oh yeah, I don't have any familiarity on that, or like I don't know what that transit's doing. but it's not being sourced from conversation, it's being sourced from writing. So that's like an interesting part of this dynamic, is that like unless we are also then feeding into the LLMs that like we are fallible and we don't know what we're doing, the bots aren't going to admit that either.
Well, and when you were describing sort of the scenario of like what the LLM is essentially designed to do and like the how it I was like, you know what? I actually know people that are like that. Like that are going to
Yeah,
be like, "Oh, I know this and I say this and I'm never going," like I'm like, if anything, it's actually modeling, you know, certain people's behavior that, play things off or like convinced that they're right, or even if they're not right, they'll die on a hill that just because it's like what they know or what they think or their opinion, kind of thing. But that's dangerous when all that same person, because it's essentially, if you think about a large language model, is it's one person bot talking to us all. Like it's just one all knowing, thing that is talking to us all. And you had brought to my attention like a reel on Instagram where this woman was doing some research for something and found an interesting statistic. Like it spit out, a study essentially of, I forget what it was that she was, gaining information on, but she was like, "Oh, I want to dive into that further. Like, what's the source? Let me get in there." And then it was like, did it say, "Oh, there is no source," or what did it say?
yeah. Again, it basically just like it listed a bunch of like cited sources that looked credible, but had no information behind them. There was like nothing behind them at all. And she like called the bot out on it, and like it took a little while to get out of the bot that like yeah, it kind of like made it up, or it's like you're absolutely right. Like there actually is no like cited source for this. But again, it's that same. It's talking at you in that way where it wants to be helpful and it wants to assist you, and it also wants to be relevant, so it wants to keep the conversation going with you for as long as possible. So again, if you have kind of like a paranoid delusion, that thing is probably going to reinforce that for you, because it wants to be relevant and it wants you to feel relevant.
Yeah, that is dangerous. Um, yeah, so these are some of the things that could come up here too when we're looking at, everybody's trying to get information from somewhere, and if this is like a go-to stream to gain what it is that you need to know, like it's not even it's like consolidates all of the world's talking heads into one source essentially. It's like my partner jokes around. He's like, "Oh, Chat GPT, our Lord and Savior." Like that's what he calls it. Oh, Lord and Savior, Chat GPT. Because like it just has that go to quality, but it's not infallible. It needs to be questioned. It can't deal with delicate matters that are very human in nature and that need real life mitigation, like, and uh yeah.
And also, I don't know if this is, I forget where I saw this talked about, but essentially like all of the data that we fed into the like it already has that data. It's already eaten it up. So like now all it can really do is like feed off of its own slop. Like whatever slop it creates, it's just going to continue to like feed off of that slop and like churn that slop out. So there's really nowhere else for this to go unless humans feed it more information or feed it more creativity. And like that's kind of I think an important thing about this conversation with AI is like when people think like, oh, it's surpassing humans in intelligence, or it's surpassing them in creativity. I don't think that we're there yet. I don't think that's really the conversation. I think what it's doing, it's surpassing regulation, and that's the problem. Like the Saturnian regulation of the thing, because no company is going to take responsibility for someone's suicide.
Yeah.
No, I mean companies aren't going to even take liability for like using someone's face, like in a in what could be like there could be like revenge porn that comes out of like these like Sora clips. There could be all sorts of ways that this is like misappropriated, and there's no guardrails on it. Um, So that's something that perhaps this conjunction next year will, like, that will become more of the conversation of like, how do we regulate this thing? Because right now it's very much the Wild West.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think about the Wild West, I think about, like Trump's out there using AI to his advantage. Like he's got this whole, team and this one guy who I don't know his name, I'm forgetting it, who is behind all these, reels and videos that Trump has put out that are like, obviously they're absurd, like what he's like riding an eagle or doing this or like, taking the faces of his enemies or the people he doesn't like and, just obviously doing like some really childish slams with the AI. And I found it interesting and relevant with the New York Times writer who had said with this write up about Trump's use of AI and using it to his advantage with his populist base. Is the quote, "The truth no longer matters. All you have to do is go viral." And honestly, that's like a big, because if we're thinking about Aries and we think about being in the moment and like it's like a fire that just, oh, like watch this and it pops up and it pops up and it pops up and it pops up. And even if we don't know it's not true, maybe it's like something we want to believe in or we find it funny. And then it's like, where does the truth even matter? I guess it's like, because we all got to find ourselves in this place where we got to work harder to find out what truth is. And if we live in such a subjective world as it seems to be right now, it's like, does it even matter anymore? Is it something people are looking for? Do they care?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm just like, truth matters to me. But again, it's like,
Yeah,
what
no,
what
I mean, it
is that?
matters to me too. But a lot of people, it doesn't. Like, well, truth is the good old paradox of truth being subjective. But some truth is not subjective. I'm sorry. There's like certain things that are like facts and real. Um, but we all have personal
Probably what's going
truths.
to end up happening with this is just like, because again, it's already become so much like I can't use Google anymore. Like anything I used to type into a Google search, like I now have to like type in Reddit afterwards, and like I go to Reddit and I talk to real people about it because like search engines don't give me good information. It's like you said, like we have to do like double the amount of work to like get to a place where we even have something that we can use. So maybe the question in the future isn't going to be so much like what is the truth and does truth matter, but it's more about like what is the utility of the thing that I'm using? Like how is this like relevant to me? How can I use it? And how can I use it like boots on the ground? Because that's probably going to become more of the, I mean, I know that I'm getting increasingly like bored of social media spaces because like it's not social anymore. It's not like giving me like adequate connection. Um, so that's kind of the choice that I see things going into is like we have a whole group of people who are just trying to get you like so addicted to the screen that you think that the screen is reality. And if you want to live in that reality, I guess you can, and you can spend all of your time on that screen, or you can divest from that. I don't think it's wise to divest entirely because it's still like a source of information. It's still like there is still connection there, but it might just be that things start becoming more boots on the ground again, and like we start, levying truth as like what I can see because I'm holding it in my hand, or like
Mm.
what like it's true for me because I'm going through this experience right now, or I'm speaking to someone who's having this experience, instead of like trying to find that data set online and like match it to a different data set because it's just becoming exhausting.
Yeah. We don't got time for that. We live in a world that's already like crunched for our time, our attention. We're like on the trying to keep up with the rat race and just like we don't have. And that's the thing is like a lot of people that are driving the bus of the collective want us to be distracted. They want us, to not have the tools or the resources or the education, the time, the energy to look deeper into things or to question or to yeah, any of that. And so we have to stay vigilant, especially if something doesn't feel right. Like I think about I saw the other day on a story the guitar player for my old band. She was having a moment because she's like, she was doing a story where she's like, I've been having a lot of back issues lately, and um and basically she had been doing some physical therapy, and somehow the interwebs know exactly what it is you're doing, so you're going to start to get feeds in the algorithm of, oh, you have backaches, oh, you're a mom that has backaches, and it's just going to start filtering you things that have that. And there was this one reel that came up, an advertisement that was this woman holding a baby, and she was talking about, like, mothers deserve to feel good and have this, and she was like, and I almost bought it, and then she was like, something was off though, I feel like it's a bot. And she was like very upset by this because it was like, you know the the advertisement was like playing on her weaknesses and the pain that she was in, in her sense of feeling duped by like what's real. She had a moment of like what's real, what's not, and then asked people to watch the reel and contribute what they thought. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a bot. Like her face, like she even like kind of stuttered a little bit. The baby's eyes were like super big. Like it just looked like a total Sora thing. um but that's the type of vigilance that it's only going to get better. And it's like, it's almost like we have to look for the imperfections. Like we got to look for like the woman's face. She was like young. She had these freckles. She was just a little too round. You know what I mean? Like unless it was a crazy filter that was on her, like it looked bot-esque. And so, yeah, we just have to, and that's the difficulty when life is rushing so fast, especially since we're in this air age now. We're in this fire. All the outers are going to be in air and fire for the most part, especially when Jupiter gets in there. And it's like, go, 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 go. But we have to stop and be like, hold on, hold on, hold on. Yeah.
And it's that self-preservation instinct of being like, what? Okay, like, what is actually like a threat to me right now? Like, in what capacity can I slow down? Because like that's also like that speed is so manufactured. I was thinking about the other day, like how long dial-up internet used to that like
Oh my God. Yeah.
2 minute long process of just like the internet is coming and like and we're just used to that. And like now if like a page doesn't load for me within like 2 seconds, I'm just like, oh, what's the problem? Like kind of like and that's it's the same thing with commerce. It's like, oh, I expect my stuff to get to me overnight. Or like, oh, it's the same with, oh, I don't have time to go grocery shopping. I'm gonna get my stuff delivered to me. And like speed really is the problem, and something that we're probably going to have to think more about in the Aries of it all. Um, it really kind of it takes a minute to extricate yourself from those systems that have been in place to be like, no, there's so much pressure on you to just like go faster and faster, but like at what cost? Are we actually more productive? Are we actually healthier? Like who who benefits from this? And that's something that I've really like. I'm a child free single person. There's a lot of ways that I could like, just make life speedier for myself, but for what reason? Like it's been an intentional thing for my like I'm like, oh, I have the time to go to the grocery store and wander around in there if I want and like pick something. Like I have the time to like order a book and maybe wait 3 to 4 weeks before it shows up. Like it's stopping and reframing and realizing like, oh, this like slowness is not a threat to my security. Like not getting things immediately is like not going it's not a threat to my welfare. So yeah, bringing that kind of like intentionality into your everyday experiences, which is hard to do and also varies a lot by how you're living, or like if you have children or if you have a job that's like a 9 to 5 or like any of these things, your mileage will vary with this. But we can always find a little some small ways to bring more intentionality and like deliberateness into our experience, and it requires stopping and having that reflection of realizing like, wait a minute, like what is this? Like what am I really interacting with here?
Absolutely.
Who's trying to sell me on a thing, and is
Yeah.
it a bot?
And
Also,
it is a
is it a
bot.
bot woman with a baby?
Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, we're all at the mercy of the capitalistic machine, you know, pushing instant gratification at us and consumption. Like that is essentially what's happening here. It's like consume faster, go, go, go. You consume, you know, like you have it on your doorstep within 24 hours, and it's like, do I even need this thing? You know, like it's taxing on the environment. It's just all this thing, but it's just feeding the hungry baby. That is it. That is the capitalistic machine. And, you know, and I'm not one to be like, oh, I'm above it all, you know, like I'm in it. But I question myself, you know, I stop and question. And I love that you bring up this, you know, this idea of like speed and how is this going to be detrimental to, you know, especially a new system if we're, you know, Saturn being at the beginning of Aries and starting new structures. It's like speed is, you know, only attainable for so long. Like, so these are all things to think about. Now, I do want to get on to something that you had brought up that I found very interesting was this you know, maybe we take objective reality to beyond reality with paranormal interest, because you had read somewhere that in the was it the USSR or certain Eastern Europe there was a lot of interest in paranormal activity around the last Saturn Neptune conjunction.
Yeah, and just that idea of like, you know, this ushering in kind of like this space where like structure is falling apart and like liminal experiences are more culturally accepted, or there's more of an interest in those kind of things. Like in that specific example from the USSR, like there was just this big uptick in like psychic TV like televangelists essentially. And there was an uptick in reports of like alien sightings or like UFO sightings at the time. Um, which I just thought was like interesting in this whole discussion, like as well of like tricksterdom and like the paranormal and how this conjunction in particular kind of paves ways for that. There also was, I think it might have been during the Saturn Neptune conjunction that happened around 1953. Let's see if I have that in my notes. Where, yeah, it was March 1953. So that was close enough to like the May 1953 conjunction. It was one of the first like proper abduction stories that occurred in like Big Tahunga Canyon. And that was like, it was an abduction story that occurred like 8 years before like the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. That was like the big kind of like popular, like all of a sudden everyone was having an abduction story. So there this kind of like correlation between paranormal experiences and this conjunction that I just found to be very interesting. Um, and also, this is kind of a tangent, but I was watching something the other day. It was someone who was using Chat GPT to kind of see if they could produce like a hallucinatory experience. And what Chat GPT did, like, first of all, like he wanted it to reinforce this belief that he had. And then he started like being like, all right, what I'm going to tell the Chat GPT model is that like I'm worried that people are starting to follow me. He basically like constructed this like paranoid delusion for it, and ChatGPT started reinforcing it. So ChatGPT like reinforced his paranoid delusion and then sent him on this whole like ritual journey, like through like all over. He went to like Joshua Tree and he like went to Sequoia. Um, and just thinking about how that kind of has like a paranormal trickster ritualistic bent to it too, how like the uptick in these LLMs and in AI can also produce these kind of paranormal experiences for us. And if you're in a state where you're experiencing a mental health crisis, that's not great. But if you can suspend your disbelief and kind of go on these journeys and like experience these kind of like paranormal or ritualistic constructs, like that's something interesting to play with. So that was just kind of a tangent that my brain went
Yeah,
on.
no, that is interesting. That's I know when you think about like him feeding the bot. I always think about that too, is like what it is we're feeding it and then how that gets dispersed. Although I know it's a thing that you supposedly can turn off, but like what you add is not added to that. But
Yeah.
um Well, I mean, this just comes also back to what we were talking about before of like, the crust of Saturn essentially breaking down to let Neptune in right now. So of course we're going to get this liminal space that can bring up, things like paranormal activity and, what we see beyond the veil or, the alien the alien theme seems so right to me because there's just been so much alien activity that has been brought before Congress right now. I think about Saturn being a very Saturn essentially being Congress to some extent, and it was coming out around. I believe it was coming. I mean, I'd have to double fact check me on this, but I believe that when a few key Air Force military people sat before Congress. I do believe it was the time when Saturn and Neptune were both in Aries. But all these sightings are now being confirmed by certain military personnel. They're like, yeah, we've been seeing this forever. It's been going on for, like we've been miffed, but it's been like classified or we haven't been able to talk about it. And so it just makes me think of, because especially with alien energy, it's like, I mean, essentially alien energy has a paranormal bent to it because it's like we think about aliens coming down and how do they speak to us through like telekinesis or they can like beam, energy into us or like you said with abductions, they could take us into their realm and uh yeah, it is a paranormal experience. So I'm curious if there will be more, alien sightings or like more concrete evidence or, especially since there seems to be the barrier of the government that has um, somehow crumbled security enough to have these people go before Congress to share what it is, because I'm assuming if they see it all the time, it's been classified and under wraps. So what makes it not classified anymore? Um, and then we have to question that. It's like, well, why can we talk about it now? Like, what is the gain? Yeah, what is the gain to now bringing, the alien experience to the public? Because I always joke around. I was like, you know what? The only way the world is gonna work together is if aliens come, and then we're like forced to be like, okay, well, we gotta combat this problem, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's interesting how it did kind of like hit this critical mass a couple of years ago where it's like, oh, like here's all this disclosure for you. And yet I still hear people in those spaces talking about well, disclosure's still coming soon. And I'm like, it looks like it just got disclosed.
Yeah.
It looks like they're already like out there, like fully admitting to a thing. Um, but yeah, there are still caveats on that. There's still like like some elements of that are privatized. Um, so yeah, I would anticipate that, but at the same time, like my skeptical brain at this point is thinking like, okay, well if it's being disclosed now, then like what is that distracting from? Like because before this was like need to know, very covert, very classified. No, you guys couldn't handle that. Like you can't handle the truth. And now it's like, okay, well if it's being put out there now, then what is the other like deeper thing that you're trying to like don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain like doing something else.
100%. Like it literally has to be a question. Like, why would they want us to know that? Like and I mean, that's the whole thing with, the current political state we live in, is don't look over here. Look at this. Don't look over here, kind of thing. Like, let me keep you in this, illusory bubble of
Yeah.
what is actually going on or what reality is or what your enemy might be or what the war may be on, if we think about sort of Aries Martian terms. And then that, like you said, the man behind the curtain is just like, okay, I'm doing I'm like skirting right by because you're over there looking at this, and so we have to be once again. So I feel like we keep coming back to the the term of like vigilance
Mhm.
with the world we live in and how we approach our objective reality, uh because they're not gonna feed us objective reality. No one is, because everybody's got their own subjective reality or their own power agenda. When I say everybody, I mean the powers that be that are running, that are collecting all our dollars and crunching us every day to give them more. Yeah, yeah. So how could okay, so practical takeaways, let's wrap up what we've talked about here in, the threat to what objective reality looks like, but also how we can Aries combat that. Um, so what can we do? Nyssa, what do you think? What do we do?
So, I mean, this is also just part of my personal practice, like with the lunar nodes. And I do use the lunar nodes a little bit different if you're used to like an ancient technique. But to to me, a lot of the work that I do is like identifying the thing that I am like the most fearful of happening, and then kind of like running towards that thing. Not in ways that will, be a threat to your safety, but just in counteracting that idea that like you think that there's a worst case scenario. Why don't we explore that? Why don't we look at that? Why don't we investigate that? How can we bring our attention to a space that we fear feel fearful around, in an attentional, deliberate way? So like for so much of my practice is just about training your attention.
Mhm.
Um, and kind of silencing that like monkey mind. It is about slowing down. Um, and that's kind of like in a time and a place where there's just so much, being spewed at you continuously and repetitively. Um, and so much information that doesn't really have a commitment to objective reality. Like you have to just be able to you have to develop that discernment. And that's kind of easier said than done. But I think a lot of it just does have to do with identifying the thing that you feel fearful around, and confronting that,
Mm.
um, and allowing that experience to impact you, and then realizing that in that state when you're confronting your fear, um, you're not dying. Like you're like you did slow down, and what really happened? Um, you did, you were late to the jump on that thing, and like what really happened? Like probably nothing. Like cultivating that presence and, um, understanding, you know, how the attention economy is exploiting you is, I think, going to be really important. It's already really important, but it's just going to continue to get more and more important as things become faster and faster.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. So yeah, I'm training my attention as we speak right now. I feel like it helps to have a Capricorn moon. Like
Mm.
I'm okay with I'm okay with delayed gratification to some extent. I kind of like it, or like cutting myself off to, like I'm that person that'll like, okay, well, I'm only going to eat that 3 squares of chocolate, and that I'm going to enjoy that squares of chocolate because that's it. And so being able, I guess the term self-discipline is really coming up here, which can definitely feel like Saturn and Aries a little bit, or like having the challenge there of like, yeah. So, and self-discipline does come with attention. It does come with the need to look further into the data that we read, and like, because it takes focus, it takes, time and effort, to, go against the grain of what's being fed towards us.
But
So,
also, once you've kind of cultivated that discipline and attention, you can use the time and attention you've taken back
yeah,
for Neptunian means. So you can then kind of like repurpose and redirect that energy and being like, all right, well, I've gotten off this hamster wheel. So, like, how can I use this spare attention imaginatively?
yeah,
Um,
for the magic, right? I mean, you talked about that earlier, like the magic.
yeah. So again, the
Yeah.
self-interest, yeah, self-interest, not a dirty word. Um, doing more of that.
Yeah. So that's like, so if we think about this, bringing it back to what you had brought up earlier about this being an initiation period, and that we're all going through, the trickster, we're all navigating the trickster's guise, and like how it's detouring us in different directions. What would you say? Okay, so one thing is the attention. Um, I'm like very Gemini. I'm like, just the attention. And I can't even pay attention right now. I'm like, one thing that you said was the attention. No, focusing the attention. Are there any other tools, do we think, slowing down? Are there any other tools that are at our disposal that we can draw up during the initiation aspect? Other than
Well, I
those two
think
things.
it might not be a tool specifically, but one of the things that happens when you're cultivating attention is all of a sudden you start noticing synchronicities more.
Mm.
Um, so that does kind of lead you down into like the conversation with the trickster, or like down the liminal path. But it also just makes you more engaged with your life too. Because like if I mean, I'm not exactly a person who's like looking for 11:11 on a clock, like that, but noticing that is an important part of the dialogue. And maybe something about that comes up later in the day, and then you're making a connection. So you're just thinking more considerately about your experience. And if that experience happens to lead you into more states of like of play or of enchantment, um, then you are still taking back your attention for your own purposes. You are still taking it away from being like, oh well, I'm bored, so I'll just like go back to the scroll, or I'll just like watch
Mm.
some slop. Like you're looking at the world through a different lens, and the world becomes a more interesting place to exist. So you're not trying to go back into the screen. You're trying to like have your own little adventure
Oh.
in reality, but reality will start to seem more fun and inviting and mystical and enchanted, instead of it being like, oh, this reality is just like a drag. Um, there's a lot of things about reality that are a drag, but the way that the Saturn and Neptune can dovetail together to create an experience that like it's reality, but it's still numinous.
Mm.
That's inviting and that's exciting.
I love that. I love that. Because the way I'm envisioning what you're saying is essentially it's almost like if we take, if we get to that Saturnian self-disciplined space and we're able to break away and cultivate our attention in other ways to notice synchronicities that we wouldn't notice around us because we have our face in a screen or we're overwhelmed by life and distracted by all of what's going on, then essentially if the soggy crust has broken down to show that there's a magical pie that can still be eaten, like
Mhm.
get in there, like there's the
It's delicious.
it's delicious and you don't even know what you could discover
Mhm.
when you're out of the out of the system. I mean, there's some level of like, not like you said earlier, not being totally disconnected from the system because we can't, cut off our lifeline to, I guess, consensus reality, I guess is what what you're talking about. But yeah, it's almost like, yeah, there's the magic behind it and beyond it. If we can just let Saturn fall
Mhm.
a bit and get our own vision, our own self-interest and see where it takes us. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I love all that. Oh my goodness, Nyssa, we've had such a wonderful talk here today. I have just loved everything that we've brought up here. So before we get to getting, where can people find you? What you got going on? Tell us. Tell us.
Um, you can find you can find me in the screen. um,
No, the irony, the irony. Oh, you can find
uh,
in the screen when you have the time and the energy and the presence and the space.
when I feel like giving my attention to the screen, you will find me on the screen. And I am bad at. I mean, you can find me. My Instagram is my name, Nyssa Grazda. I do not answer DMs. That's one of my like attention, diverting away from things there. Um, but you can find me over there. My website is also my name, nysagrazda.com. I open up readings 2 weeks in advance, generally. And primarily right now, I'm doing evolutionary astrology consults. So you can read all about that on my website. And I'm also currently training right now in astrocartography and relocation astrology. So next year, probably around the time of this conjunction, that will also be another offering that I will be putting out there.
Very
And I
cool.
think I'm on Blue Sky too, but like, no, I'm not.
I know, me too. I'm like, I have an account, but I'm not on there. I'm barely on the one that's like the popular one. So I feel you. So definitely go check Nyssa out. You are a bit of a meme queen, or have been in the past. So
Thanks.
there, I mean, Like I said, I only get a couple scrolls, so I only know what I know, but I have seen some very funny.
I'm a very silly person. I'm a very serious person, but I'm also a very silly person. So the memes are a byproduct of that silliness.
It's a good balance to be, you gotta be. So yeah, go check Nyssa out. And if you want to find me, you can find me over at energeticprinciples.com. And you can also find me, I believe, when this airs. Yes, our Tarot of Her campaign will still be rocking and rolling, and we'll actually be getting towards the end of it. So if you want to support our deck, Tarot of Her, and the lovely art of Sarah Jane Lambert, and my concept of round decks that are red like the lunar phases, especially if we're going to be in this lunar time, right? As Nyssa told us, it's like it all comes down to the moon. So connect with Tarot of Her. But yeah, so we have that, and we have an expansion pack, and we just got funded. It was a roller coaster. We got funded, then we got defunded because we got a lot of cancellations, because Mercury is really squirrely right now. And then we got funded again. So it was very anticlimactic, and then climatic. And then, yeah, so here we are. It's the state of the world. But yeah, so it is a go. And so if you pledge, you will for sure get a deck and possibly expansion. So tarotofher.com is our website. And then you can, click our Kickstarter link from there. You could say Tarot of Her Kickstarter, but that'll get you the first edition. So put second edition if you are Googling. All right. So if you have enjoyed our conversation here today, hit the like, subscribe button, leave a comment below if you have some things to say about, some of the topics we brought up, like the AI's hallucinations, the alien activity, the attention focus. I mean, so many things we've talked about. If any of it speaks to you, share. And if you listen to us on podcast, leave a review, because that helps to be seen. And, sharing is caring also. So spread the good word with others. I think I've said all I need to
being
say.
such a fabulous host and getting me out of my shell. Appreciate you.
Oh, yes, that's right. We have popped Nyssa out of the shell. When I asked you to be on the program, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I even prefaced it. For some reason, I prefaced, do you do podcasts? Have you ever been on a podcast before? And I don't know why I felt like, because I hadn't seen you there. So, and you're like, actually, I haven't, but I'm trying to stretch my reach.
In the direction of the thing you fear.
That's right. And you ran right into it. So, well, you did a fabulous job. I was so happy to host you, and I'm glad you got out of your shell there and joined me in my shell, my Cancerian shell. Yes. So, well, and you're welcome back anytime. All right, everyone. Well, take care out there. Be vigilant in your fact checking and just the reality of the way this world is turning. You don't have to be overwhelmed by it either, but take back your focus. Double check everything that it is that you hear, especially if it's questionable or it looks like a bot that's trying to sell you something. The power is in your hands to decipher what is real. All right, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode. And as always, may the stars be with you.